Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We'll be waiting just a few minutes past the hour to get started, just to give everyone a chance to connect. Thanks. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining us today and being part of our community. We have some great content planned, but before we start, I just want to go over some housekeeping items. Feel free to ask questions at any time by typing in the IM window. Be aware that anything you post will be publicly visible. If you prefer, you can post your questions anonymously by checking the box right below where you enter your question. We've had a large number of people register for this webinar and across the series. We're really thrilled to see this level of interest. Please bear in mind, we might not be able to answer all of your questions during the session. We do have people standing by to answer your questions, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can during the call. If you visit aka.ms/MCAS Q&A, you'll see a post dedicated to this webinar series and all the questions that have come up over the course. We'll review the question transcript after this webinar, and we'll post further answers to that location. If you're listening to the recording of today's webinar after the event and have any questions, this is also the place to post those questions. We're recording today's webinar, and this will be shared publicly. We will post the recordings on our community at aka.ms/MCAS recordings. Talking of community, if you're not already signed up, do come and join us at aka.ms/security community. It's on the slide on the screen. This is the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars. It's also where we post major announcements and a place where you can interact directly with our engineering teams that are creating our security products. You'll be able to influence our product designs, get early access to changes by doing things like participating in private previews, requesting features, reviewing our roadmap, and attending in-person events and webinars like today. As I mentioned, we have some great content planned. Today's session is part 6 of our 6-part series on Microsoft Cloud App Security, or MCAS for short. Throughout this series, we've been walking you through all the major pillars of functionality and showing you how to configure and deliver each part. So I'd like to introduce you to the team on the call today. Sebastian will be presenting and is one of our resident MCAS experts in the call. He's a program manager in our MCAS team and part of what we call our Get to Production group. This role is focused on helping our customers deploy and configure MCAS, so it's well suited to helping us out today. On the call, we also have Gershon, Dima, Danny, here to help answer your calls and questions. So with the housekeeping covered, I'll pass you on to Sebastian to get started.
Thanks, Adam, and hi everybody. So as Adam explained, today we're going to cover the last part of our webinar series, and we're going to talk about security workflow automation using Microsoft Flow and Cloud App Security. So first, let's start with an introduction for Flow for those who have never heard about this. So the idea behind Flow is work less, do more, and help you to do things smarter by automating some workflow across your application and services. An example of this is to create some automated scenarios by having some specific trigger or actions, like, for example, looking for an email that will be received in a mailbox, asking maybe a user validation before forwarding that email, or copying the file that was attached to this email to another location within Salesforce or your OneDrive or any other things. So the idea is really to automate actions based on some specific triggers. When it comes to automating your security workflows, this is actually the same process that we want to have here. And the idea is really to let you automate your incident management for cloud threats or file policy violation, new application that will be discovered in our shadow discovery capabilities, or malicious user activities, and do things like routing the alert to the right SOC team within the environment, or maybe automating some ticket generation in your ITSM in the cloud or on premises, maybe requesting user or manager input to get some insight and knowing exactly what you want to do with these alerts, or maybe automatically block some risky application within your proxy on your firewall. You have here an example of the flow. So you see this is a really graphical tool that we're going to cover in details in a few minutes. And this specific capability is using more than 100 connectors that are not only Microsoft connectors. So you can see that, for example, we can connect to external SMS system, Azure Active Directory, or messaging systems. When we talk about Microsoft Flow licensing, we have three flavors for it. We have first the Microsoft Flow licenses included with Office 365, and those licenses allows you to connect all the Office 365 products, including Cloud App Security, and you have 2,000 flows per month. This is the number of execution per license, but this is pooled across all your users in your tenant. We have another licensing version, which is Flow P1, that allows you to run any connectors like premium connector, including Jira or ServiceNow. And here you have more runs per month. The last one is Microsoft Flow Premium P2 that includes all the capabilities explained for Flow P1, but here you have more execution per month for those licenses and extra admin capabilities like being able to prevent some connectors to discuss together and advanced reporting. The number of execution you see here per license can of course be acquired additionally during the purchase of your licenses. Let's first have a look at the configuration of Flow and Cloud App Security. So to be able to use this capability, you will need to first create an API token in Cloud App Security. So this API token will be used by Flow to discuss with Cloud App Security. You will have to create an MCAS connection using this API token. Then you will have to create a flow that will start with a Cloud App Security trigger. So you're able to then use that flow within the MCAS console and assign this workflow to a policy. So before having a look at the configuration, let's first discuss what we'll be covering today. In the automation scenarios demo that we want to present you today, we have the request input from user manager to Triage alert. So we can show you how you can automate those alerts by asking some other people what you should do with them. Disable a user in Azure Active Directory and in on-premises Active Directory. And this specific implementation here require you to understand that we're going to use what we called Azure Automation, which is an Azure services that allows runbook delivery to on-premises computer that are running a hybrid worker. So those computers that are running on premises will connect to Azure Automation or Azure Service then, where you define the different playbooks that are actually scripts. And then using this integration with on-premises environment, you're able to contact anything like Active Directory, Hyper-V, your VMware server, or any other system on premises. When you install your hybrid worker, the best practice will be to install this agent on 2 computers at least to provide high availability. And you can see that the connections between your on-premises environment in Azure is only a non-bound connection. So we're not asking you to allow external IPs to enter through your firewall on premises. And this is how we're going to deliver those runbooks. The next scenario after contacting the on-premises service will be to close automatically the unusual location alert when we have users that have configured an out-of-office message. We'll also have a look at how to remove automatically malicious inbox forwarding rule in Exchange Online. And we will conclude by removing sensitive file sharing after requesting a user validation. So let's move to the first input request here. When you want to start using Flow, the first thing you have to do is to go to the MCAS console. Now that you are at the 6th part of the webinar series, you should be familiar with this console. But if you want to get the API token that we're going to use with Flow, you have to go here in the settings, in security extensions. And in your security extensions, you have to generate a new API token. So the API token that you can create from here can be requested by clicking on the plus button. You have to define a token name. I'm going to call this webinar EU. I click on generate, and please note that the API token is provided here, and you have to save it for later use. If you close this message, you will not be able to come back to this API token. When you have this API token, the next thing you have to do is to go to the playbooks. In my environment, I already have several playbooks that are configured, but if you click on the plus button, you will be redirected to the Microsoft Flow environment. You can see that here I already have several flows created, but the thing I want to show you here is that you have to create in your connections here a connection to the different system that you're going to contact. And one of the systems is, of course, Cloud App Security. So when you come to your connection, if you click on New Connection, you can search for Cloud App Security. And you will see here your Cloud App Security. Click on the plus, and this is where you can paste the API key that we generated before. When it's done, you have to create a flow. So let's start with a new flow, and you can start by either creating from blank or using template. You can see that by default we already have some templates provided for Cloud App Security. When you search for those templates, you see that we already provide 5 templates. So you can start using those ones, but for the education purpose of this webinar, I'm going to start from a blank. But remember that you can always start with the templates that we already pre-created for you. So let's create a new flow from blank so you understand the full context. So the flow is made of different parts, and the first thing we have to configure when we create a flow is to create a trigger. A trigger is something that will start the flow. So let's start by looking at Cloud App Security. And you can see that here I have my Cloud App Security connector. And in the trigger, I only have one trigger when an alert is generated. Next, after triggering the flow, you have to define the different steps. So my first steps here is going to contact my user manager. So if I look at the different connectors and action that exist here, if I want to use the search by looking at something like get manager, you can see that luckily for me, there is already an action in Office 365. So if I click on this action, I can search for a user manager by providing the user principal name. How can I obtain this user principal name? If you click in the contextual menu here, you see that you already have dynamic contents coming from the previous action. So here you see that I have some properties coming when an alert is generated, which is my trigger, and I can search for my compromised entity. And here the compromised entity is going to be the compromised user principal name. A best practice when you're working with Flow is to rename the action and add some comments. Like here, I'm going to rename my get manager to get compromised user manager. And in the comment, I will quickly add a comment explaining what I want to do. Here, I want to get a manager. Once you have the compromised user manager, the next thing you have to do is to here send an email to the manager. And because we want to ask the manager what we should do with these alerts, what we have to do is to type send email with some options. And you can see that here for Office 365, here we have an action called send email with option. Oh, sorry, I chose the right one. I click on the Outlook.com instead of the Office 365 one. So let's select here Office 365, so I'm sure I'm not messing up. And here is the right one. You have to define here to who you want to send this email. So this email must be sent to the user manager here. So to get this, I have to search for an email property. And you see that when I type mail, I have here the mail coming from the previous information here. You have to now select the subject of your email. So what I want to add here is something like alert here and compromised user information here. And you have now to compose the email that will be sent to the manager. When you compose your email, you have to define different things. Like here, I want to use HTML only. You have to define the importance. I'm going to flag this as highly important. You have to define the option that you're going to use. So all the different possibilities that the user will have when receiving this email. So first thing I want to do is to say ignore alert. Second choice will be disable user. So we let the manager automatically disable the compromised user. And the last choice will be request investigation. And the last part here will request the SOC team to investigate. You can then define the selection for the text, and my text will be, please select the action. And you can now add in the body more information, like dear, and let's add the display name of my manager. Dear Mr. We detected that, and I want to add my compromised user information here. Compromised entity might have been compromised. Please choose an action. Your security team. This is the email that the manager will receive based on the information we just created. So when you request an option to a user, and I'm going to rename this to be sure, so ask manager is the name of my action here. You have to define how you're going to handle those choices. How can you do this? You have to define in your flow some control. If I click here on control, you see that I have several control. One of the control that I could use could be the condition, so if or else, but this is not what I'm going to use here. I'm going to use the switch because I have 3 choices here. So it's going to be much more convenient for me to generate the different action based on the manager answer. So the first case is going to be ignore alert. Yeah, so just to remember, that's one of the choice that I ask here to my manager. So here, if the answer is ignore alert, what I want to do, and sorry, I forgot to choose the selected option here from the previous email. What I want to do is to dismiss the alert. So how can I do this? You have to search for the Cloud App Security connector. And Flow comes here with Cloud App Security. And what I want to do is here dismiss the Cloud App Security alert. So when I click on this action, you see that I have to provide the alert ID. So the alert ID here is provided by my trigger. So I have to search for my provider information here, provider alert ID. And I have to define my command. And here I could say dismissed by manager, and I can add the display name of that user. So this is an easy way for you to triage those alerts by asking the user manager what you should do. Next, after my ignored alert, I have to cover the disabled user case. So when I click here on add an action, I want to disable my user. And to do this, I have to search for my Azure AD connector. And in the Azure AD connector, you see that we have an action called update user. When you click on update user, you have to define the user that you want to update. So I have to select my compromised user. So this is my compromised entity. And if you click on show advanced options, you see that you have more information, more details. And the details that I want to update here is account enabled. And I want to select this to no. Something really important regarding these settings. This is settings that's going to apply to Azure AD property only. It's not something that's going to be applied to the on-premises Active Directory user. So it means that if you're in your environment, you have configured synchronization using Azure AD Connect. Once the synchronization occurs, so it occurs by default every 30 minutes, then the user account will be re-enabled. So we'll see in the next flow how we can solve that issue. So let's rename this action. And I will say that this is disable the user. And once I have disabled the user, what I want to do is to then send an email to the manager. So I have to select here to who I want to send this email. Mail. And I can say action complete. And in your email, you can explain why yours did this. So based on your input, we disabled the user, and you can specify the compromised entity. And I will rename this to confirm to manager. And what I want to do now that I've sent those emails is to close the alert in Cloud App Security. So again, I search for my Cloud App Security connector. And in the action, this time, instead of using dismiss, what I want to do is resolve the alert. And the resolve will be done on the alert ID that I used before, provider alert ID. And you can add a comment resolved by ring user compromise entity. So you see that it is pretty simple to start from scratch and already handling all those different things. Now I just have to convert my last case. So let's rename this. And I have to click on the plus button here. And just to be sure what I use, it was request investigation. So for this option, I have to select now request investigation. And what I want to do is either log a ticket in a maybe ITSM service, maybe in ServiceNow, maybe in Jira or anything else. But what I'm going to do here, because I don't have those systems connected in my environment, I'm going to use Teams. And in Teams, I want to post a message. You see post a message here. And this message will be posted to my SOC Teams in the alerts channel. And in the message, you can define exactly what you want, like new alert. And here you can add the details, like the alert description and the alert display name. And we will see how we can customize this is in the second flow that's going to recover this. So this is really an easy way for you to start from a blank template. And you see that it only took a few minutes. Again, you can use our template to start doing these things without any effort. I'm going to call this demo flow 01. I save my flow. And now that I have saved my flow, I'm ready to use this flow with my alerts in Cloud App Security. So what I have to do now is to move to my Cloud App Security portal and move to the policy menu. So when you go to policies, you can then search for a specific policy that you want to use. Like in my case, I could search for anomaly detection policies, for example. And I want to look for the alert I want to attach. So maybe what I want to find here is multiple failed login attempts policy. So this is one of our built-in detection. And what I want to do is to send the alerts to Flow. And here you just have to select the playbook that you created. And here you see that I have my demo flow 01 that we just created. You click update and you're ready to go to automate your alerts with Microsoft Flow. I will cancel this one and show you how the experience is in my next demo. So let's move to the second part, which is disable user in Azure AD and in on-premises Active Directory. So this specific case here will be an extension of the previous one. Remember that we have to use another technology for this. So how can we do this? I will not redo all the different steps because it's a more advanced flow. But if I look in the flows that I've already created, this is this flow here. And you see that when an alert is generated, what I'm doing here is to get more details, to get some information from Azure Directory, from the user profile in Office 365. Again, I'm requesting the manager output. Here you can see that I've asked for more details or provide information like the display name of the user, severity, etc. So I'm going to ask my manager for this information. And based on the manager answer, just like what we did before, in addition to requesting to dismiss the alert, what I'm doing is to also post a message in Teams. So this message here is composed using HTML. So you can create nice messages and you will see an example of those in my Teams. Second thing, so nothing new now, is to disable the user in Azure AD like we did before. But what I want to do this time, because I'm going to disable my user account, I want to inform the user by using an SMS. So I'm going to use one of my Twilio phone number that I've acquired, and I'm going to send a message to the user explaining that due to a severity incident in my company, the account has been disabled by the manager, and I'm providing here the display name of the manager, and I'm asking to contact either the manager, and here the mobile phone could be also dynamic, or the service desk. What you could do if you're an international company is to provide automatically the local phone number of your service desk based on the user location. So those things could be done here. The next thing that I'm doing is to disable the user on premises. And to do this, what I'm doing here is calling Azure Automation, just like what we discussed before. So in Azure Automation, I have to specify my subscription, my resource group, and my automation account. And I have to use what we call a runbook. A runbook in Azure Automation will be a script written in PowerShell or in Python that will be able to execute with some parameters. And the parameters that I'm going to use here is using the user principal name. So when I'm calling my Azure Automation script, what I'm doing here is to pass the user UPN. Let's move to the Azure console to have a look at what we can do to get this working. So when I go to Azure Automation here, so this is my automation account for my Sebastian account. And you see that here I have different scripts, and one of those scripts is disable AD account after an MCAS alert. When I click on this runbook, and if I edit it just to show you what we have, what I'm doing with this script, after receiving here a parameter called user principal name, I'm importing the Active Directory module in my hybrid worker. So remember, those actions, the execution of this script will happen on premises. What I'm doing is using credentials that are saved in my Azure Automation environment. So this is going to be a user on premises that has permission to disable the user. I'm collecting the date to be able to add some logging to my script execution. I'm searching for my user by using a filter on the user principal name. And if the user is enabled, what I'm doing here is to simply disabling the user with that command, disable AD account. If the user was already disabled, I'm sending back that the user is already disabled, and I'm catching the error that the user doesn't exist in my Active Directory. That's something that would happen if you have cloud accounts only. So that information can be sent back to my flow. If I go back to my flow, you see that this is what I was doing with my disabling user on premises. So next thing that I'm doing, just like in my previous example, is to resolve the alert. So I provide information about disabling the user when the manager approved for this. And I'm sending the resolution email to my manager. So nothing new compared to what we did before. The next case that we have here, if I go to my manager requested to investigate further, is that now I'm posting a message in Teams, and I'm also sending incident detail to a shared mailbox called IT support. Sorry, to my account using IT support. And you see that here I'm using the same output thing. It's because I wanted to send the same message to two different actions. So I've been writing here my HTML message that I can reuse across my different actions. So now that we've seen the version 2 of the previous flow, let's test this. So what I'm going to do here, because I cannot trigger those alerts instantly, is to show you with previously collected data how it works. So what I'm going to do to demonstrate this is to use a new user account. So I'm going to connect to the manager mailbox. And this is the user that's going to receive the alert from the user. So you can see that in this user mailbox currently, I have several alerts based on other tests that I've been doing. And let's focus on the new one. So that's a previous one. So now what I'm going to do here, and I want to show you how fast it happened, is to execute my flow. So if I click now on my test, so I'm going to reuse information I got before. What I'm going to do now is to, after executing this flow, send a message to my manager. So you see that in my mailbox, there is a new message that has been received. And this is exactly what we see here in flow. So my manager received this message. So we recently detected a security alert from Megan Burns and need your input to complete the investigation. And as a manager, I can choose to either ignore the alert, disable the user, or request investigation. I'm only covering this in this demo, the disable user. And to do so, I want to show you also something that I will have at in my as an end user. So I'm going to share here my phone screen. And to do this, I want to split my screen. So if now as an admin, I come and if I, where is my email here? So I want to disable the user. So when I do this, you see that it's pretty fast. And as an end user, I've received a new message explaining me that my user, Megan, has been disabled by manager Julian Isla. So as an end user now, I'm aware that something happened on my site, and you could add dynamic links or maybe a specific site or specific procedure for the user to know exactly what they want to do. As you see, this is extremely fast and really easy to automate your security incident. And in my flow, I will have those results that will happen. As a result, I will have my user account being disabled. If I go to Azure to show you what happened, and unfortunately, I cannot connect to that on-premises VM here. But if I look in Azure AD, what happened for that user, you can see that my user Megan, which is the compromised user, has now the setting block signing configured to yes. So the user can now cannot access any cloud resources. So this is really an easy way for secure your company and automate all those security alerts. You see that this is something that took only a few seconds. And if you compare to a manual investigation performed by your SOC team, that's something that will probably take dozens of minutes or even more in large organizations. But let's move now to the other examples. Another story that I want to explain here is how to automatically close one of the MCAS alerts called unusual location when a user has an out of office message. Why did I want to show you this one? Because when we have holiday periods coming like this one, or during the summer or Christmas, we know that our customers are receiving dozens or even hundreds of those alerts. The reason is simple, because we have a machine learning mechanism that will learn about your user habits. Like in my case, I live in Belgium, but most of the time when summer comes, I like to go to the sun in south of France or in Spain. When you have users performing those actions and maybe continuing to sync their emails, you will have this kind of alert that will pop up. But in most cases, you don't really care about those ones, because somebody connecting from another country, it's only one indicator. What's really important is to look if that user has access to more data or if they perform other things. So what we can do now with this flow is to triage the alerts that are really benign compared to alerts that really require you to investigate. So let's go back to flow and see how we can do this. I'm going to use one of the flow that I already created, which is auto close unusual location alert. So here the trigger is the same. When we have an alert in MCAS, I'm collecting information from the user profile in Office 365. And then what I want to do is to get information from the user based on the email address that we collected before. I want to show you how you can add this because there is no get user out of office in the flow action. So just for the purpose here, what I want to show you here is a get mail tips. If I'm able to find it in Office 365 for my Outlook. And here I want to mail tips. Here, this one. You see that the get mail tips for a mailbox. If you look at the information for this action, this information is going to provide you information like automatic replies or out of office messages if the mailbox is full, or maybe if you have added extra information. So what I'm going to do here is to use that specific information for the next part of my flow. So this is something that I do for getting the out of office. Then what I want to do is to get more details from the user in Azure AD. And what I'm going to do is to use here the check group membership. So in my flow, what I want to do is to have two conditions to automatically close those alerts. The first condition is to check if the user has an out of office message configured. And the next condition is to check the group membership. If my user is part of a really sensitive account, I want to be alerted. I don't want to automatically close my alerts. So how can you do this? And this is becoming a bit more complex here. What you have to do to check the group membership is to provide the group ID of the group that you want to monitor. How do I know this? So when you're selecting this kind of action in flow, you have this message that always explains you what the action is doing. So you see that the result will be looking at a specific ID. And if you click on learn more, you will be redirected to my documentation here. And you see that we have to provide either a user ID or a user principal name. So that's the information that we require. And for the group ID, we need the unique identifier of this group. How can I get this unique identifier of my group if I want to protect my VIPs? You have to go to Azure AD for that. You have to look at the groups that exist in Azure AD. Let's take an example here for my user that will be, let's say, I don't know, DNS admin, for example. And you see that we have here in Azure AD the object ID. This is the information that you have to copy and then paste in your flow. This is really how you identify sensitive groups. And as it's explained here, if the user is not a member of this group, the output of this action will be empty. If the user is a member of this group, the output of the action will then be the value that you provided here. So if I want to go to create a condition now based on the two things that I'm looking for, my out of office message being on and the group membership, I have to use now this time a condition. And in my condition, I have to make some manipulation. So we have in Flow an expression language that you can use to manipulate your data. And this is what I'm doing here. So if I look at this information, what I'm doing in my expression, I'm looking at the result of the get user out of office action that I had before. I'm looking at the automatic reply property. And I check if inside this automatic reply, I have a message. And because I want to check if there is an out of office message, I'm using one of the flow expression function here called empty. This function here will tell me if what I'm passing here is empty or not. So the result of this operation will be true if the message is empty, or false if there is an out of office message. And this is what I'm doing here. So if the output of my function is false, it means that the out of office message is turned on. Next, I'm looking at the output of my previous action, and I look at the body. And if the body do not contain my sensitive group ID, it means that the user is not a member of this group. So my condition will be if I have a user with an out of office on and the user is not a member of this group, then my expression is true and I want to resolve the Cloud App Security alert automatically. And you can specify that here message like what we did before. Next, what I want to do is maybe spend more time in the investigation by saying, for example, that if the out of office message was on, but the user is a member of this sensitive group, I want to take some extra action, like, for example, posting a message in Teams or requesting some extra action. So that's really anything that you can use to customize those actions here. So that was the demo to explain you how you can automatically close those actions. We're planning to also provide those flow for automate other alerts that can be a bit noisy, like, for example, impossible travel alerts and similar. The next case that we want to cover here is to remove malicious forwarding inbox rules in Exchange Online. This is something extremely interesting for you because one of the most popular and simple way to compromise your user and your company data is to create an inbox rule in Exchange Online to forward specific email or maybe to hijack conversation for bank transfer. So how can you automate this action to remediate it automatically? What we do is to use a flow. So the flow will be remove malicious inbox rule. So what I'm doing here is getting information about the user and the alerts. I'm doing some manipulation here because we're still in preview and that's one of the things that we're going to change. But what I'm doing is collecting more information from my MCAS alerts. I'm looking at a specific information in my alert called rule name. So this is going to look for my inbox rule that has been detected by Cloud App Security. And if I have this rule, what I want to do is to call the inbox rule runbook. So this is again calling Azure Automation Script. I specify the name of my runbook, which is remove malicious inbox rules. And I provide this time two parameters that will be the user identity and the rule identity. So when I execute this, what's going to happen in Azure Automation is the execution of another script called remove malicious inbox rule. And this script will be really familiar for people doing some Exchange administration. So you see here my two parameters. What I'm doing is to connect to Exchange Online. I'm collecting some information from my output. I'm creating an Exchange Online PowerShell session. And I'm removing the inbox rules by using the parameter that I received from my flow. Then what I'm doing is to write the output of my rule. So that's a really simple script for those who are already familiar with Exchange. If I look at what I've done also after in my flow, I'm also getting the job output. So I'm collecting information that was sent by my Azure Automation script. I'm then resolving the alert in Cloud App Security, explaining that the rule was successfully removed. And what I'm doing is to send an email to the user manager explaining that we identified malicious rules created for the compromised user. And here is the output of my Azure Automation action. This is, of course, something that you can customize. And one of the possible solutions, instead of sending an email to the manager, could be sending here information on the MCAS alerts in a team channel, just like we did before. So you see that this is something that could be highly customized and also provide direct link to the MCAS alert. So your SOC team can just monitor one location and access anything from this location, like here, accessing to the right MCAS alert. This is really something that can ease you and save time. So that's one of the examples we could have. Next and last example now is to remove sensitive file sharing after requesting a user validation. So why do we have this flow that can be proposed in your environment? So let me first go back to Cloud App Security and show you something that we can do with our file policies. When you create in Cloud App Security file policies to detect maybe files that are exposed publicly or externally, and maybe those files are classified with AIP as confidential or highly confidential, or any kind of filter based on the content. That's something that we've already covered in a previous webinar. One of the things that you can do is to take some governance action. One of the governance action can be making private, so removing all the sharing of those files or removing external user. That's something that you can easily do as an admin, but this is maybe not something that you want to do because it could just prevent your business user to do their job. Like let's think about an account manager working with an external partner on a specific document, and this document is classified as highly confidential. Because you're in IT and you're not aware of all the action of your user, and if you apply this specific rule, I'm pretty sure that you will have some complaints afterwards. So maybe a safer way for you, based on a specific process in your company, like maybe an exception for some people, instead of applying this specific action, you want to request the user is validation before removing the sharing. So what we can do, instead of taking this action, is to create an alert and using a flow. And this flow will actually request the user or the manager. Sorry, where is this one? Remove sensitive file sharing, sorry, after requesting user input. So that's what we're going to do here. We can do this in flow. If I go back to my flow, like this one, by using a combination of action. So what I'm going to do here, I'm not going to cover all the details because again, this is something that we would like to put as built-in in the future, is to first, after I received the alerts that we just saw before, is initializing some variable, things like my MCAS tenant, my MCAS token. So I'm going to call Cloud App Security API to get some details. I'm collecting some details from the alerts. I'm collecting the user and the user manager email addresses. I'm doing some JSON parsing. So you don't want me to explain you that for the moment, but this is how you can define the properties that Flow will use. I select specific entities. So I'm looking for files. And what I want to do for every file that I've detected, I want to get more details and then ask the user the validation for removing the sharing. So what I'm doing here is sending a message to my user, so to the user, which is the person that triggered this alert, and I'm asking, okay, we detected that you shared a sensitive file externally, and I'm providing here information like the file name. I could also add the file path. I explained to my user that sensitive information should be shared with extra care. So I'm educating the user here. And I'm saying to the user, if you believe that the sharing that you've created should be removed, then click on no. If you believe that this is something which is still compliant with our internal policy, click yes. So you're really here asking the user to take position and be able to confirm that he's doing something right. So based on the answer, what I'm doing, so if the user clicked yes, so the user say that the sharing is still compliant with my policy, I'm now resolving the Cloud App Security alerts, and I'm saying that the user has shared this externally on purpose. So the sensitive information sharing is compliant for the user point of view. And I'm sending back to the user a message to confirm that we close the alert. In case the user clicked no, what I want to do is to call the MCAS API to make to remove the sharing by making private the file. I'm sending details to the user explaining that based on their validation, we removed all the sharing. So this could be not all the sharing, but only external user. And then what I'm doing is to resolve the alert explaining that after the user validation, we remove the sharing. So that's the workflow that we've done. So if I go back now to my user Megan B mailbox, oh, it's locked on, of course. So let me quickly re-enable the user. So it proves that my previous flow worked for that user. Okay, block signing is gone here. Perfect with my flow. Yes, I want to stay here. So for my user here, what I want to do, and you see that I've shared already a file. Here, this is this one. So this is a sharing that I created before the webinar. And you see that I'm telling to my user, okay, dear Megan, our system detected that you shared a sensitive file externally. I'm providing the information here about this file. I'm educating the user and I'm explaining that if you select no, all the sharing will be removed. Do you want to keep the sharing for this file? So based on the user answer, if I click yes, for example, for this demo, what I'm going to do is to resolve automatically the alerts in Cloud App Security. And you see that I'm receiving an email explaining that the alert was closed as expected. If instead of clicking on the yes button, I had to click no, what would have happened is that the sharing would have been removed. And in Cloud App Security, I would have seen here in my governance log that a making private action for my credit card file that was shared would have been successfully applied. So this is really a way for you to automate the process of asking user validation before applying a governance action. So that's it for the different use cases that we wanted to cover in this webinar. I don't know, Adam, if you have any question that could be interesting to discuss right now.
Hey, Sebastian, that was a good session. Thank you. So one of the questions that's come up, which is quite a good one, and I think only you can answer at the moment, is the flows that you've demonstrated today. Are we going to make those available to the attendees?
Yes. So we are currently working on, and we just created this week a new GitHub repo where we're going to publish those different flows, and we're going to also create a series of blog posts explaining those different use cases and providing access to the code that we had here. So we can easily export and import the flow. So we'll provide all the details during those in those blog posts. So people would have to just go to those repos that we're going to share, download the flows, import them in their environment, and just use the right settings. So yes, we're going to share this and provide all the details to avoid creating this from scratch.
Fantastic. I think probably part of that process, just for the attendees, we'll make sure that the links to that GitHub repo and the blogs are also on the Tech Community site. So
yes,
this webinar series.
Yes, that's something that we'll do, definitely.
Awesome. So that was probably the main crux of it, to be honest. It's been a pretty quiet crew today. I think you've probably amazed them with all the features we have available. Unless anyone from the Microsoft side wants to contribute anything, I think we're pretty good to close out. So I'll just pause for a moment. And the silence there tells me that we're pretty good. So look, thank you very much, Sebastian. Appreciate your support and the support of the whole team over the series in general. I will post some links into the Q&A channel as well. One thing I'd like to call out that's different to this webinar than the previous ones is we have a series survey link. We'd love to get your feedback on how this series has landed, whether there's anything missing, there's things we can improve, etc. So please do take a minute or two if you can, just to have a look at the survey. I did post it earlier on in the Q&A channel. I'll post it again just shortly. Be really great to understand if there's ways we can make this better next time. So thank you for the PG team and everyone that's been involved and the attendees for spending some time over this 6-week period. If for some reason you've missed one of the previous sessions, or you just want to go back and check them out, we have them posted, as you can see, aka.ms/MCAS recordings. Communities, a huge effort and focus area for us. It's a great way for us to interact directly with you and vice versa. So please, if you haven't registered, it's well worth having a look, aka.ms/security-community. And thank you everyone for taking the time and joining these sessions over the 6-part series. I really hope you've got benefit out of it. I certainly have. I thought I knew a fair amount of this content and I still found new things. So thank you very much. At that point, we will call it a day.
Thank you, Adam. And before closing, I just want to answer, because I see many questions just appearing. We don't have yet an integration with Sentinel. It's something that will come, and we can also already query some log analytics workspace, so you could make your custom queries and by using data in Sentinel. And we'll continue to answer those questions on the tech community. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Excellent. Thank you.